It is hot out here. I will not pretend otherwise. We are in the thick of it now. The longest days, the hardest sun, the kind of heat that makes a man want to sit in the shade of the porch and let the garden fend for itself. And I will tell you plainly, most gardens do just quit in the middle of summer. The spring crops are spent. The heat beats down what is left. The bugs come on thick. And by the end of July, the whole thing looks tired and finished. But here is the thing the old people knew that most folks have forgotten. July is not the end of the garden. July is when you plant the second half of it. What you put in the ground right now in the worst of the heat decides whether your garden gives out on you in August, or whether it feeds your family clear into the fall and the first cold. The work you do now, sweating in this sun, is the difference between an empty bed come October and a table full of food when the frost is on the pumpkins. So today I will walk you through 5 things to get in the ground this month. 5 crops the lazy garden skip and then regret. And there is one number that decides the timing on nearly all of them. I will come back to it. Know that number and you cannot go far wrong. I remember my grandmother out in the garden on a July evening, after the heat of the day had let go its grip. Down on her knees in the dusk, putting in seed while the rest of the world thought the season was as good as over. I was a boy and I did not understand it. I asked her why she was planting when everything was already grown. She looked up at me and she said, "Child, this is not for now. This is for November." She was not planting for that week's table. She was planting for the table 3 months on, when the killing cold had taken every other garden in the valley, and ours was still green under the frost cloth. That is the whole secret, and it is no secret at all. It is only thinking one season ahead and being willing to do a little work in the heat for a reward that comes long after. Before I go on, I will say this once and then leave it be. I gathered the whole of these old ways, the heating, the cooling, the water, the food, the plain systems that cut a family's living costs into a book. It is called the Amish Home Blueprint. If you want the long version, the link is down below. I will not mention it again. Now the first crop, and it is the easiest thing in this whole video. The string bean. July is a hard month to start most things straight out in the garden on account of the heat and the sun and the bugs. But the bean does not care about any of that near as much as the rest, and that is exactly why you sow it now. You do not fuss with starting it inside in a tray. You put the seed straight in the ground where it is to grow, and it comes up easy as anything. That is what we call direct sowing, and the bean is made for it. Here is the other good of it. The bean is hardly troubled by pests or by disease. If your tomatoes and your cucumbers are getting chewed to ribbons and covered in spots this time of year, and they often are, the beans go on untroubled right beside them. In all my years, I can scarcely remember a disease taking my beans. And there is a reason. The bean makes its own feeding down in the roots, where it takes what it needs from the very air in the soil. So it is not so hungry and so fussy as the heavy feeders like your corn and your squash. Its leaf is tougher. Its whole nature is hardier. So the heat that stalls a tomato and the bugs that swarm a cucumber pass the bean right by. Now there is one thing to know, and it depends on where you live. If you are up north, where the summers are milder, sow your beans right now and do not think twice. But if you are down south or out west, where the sun is a hammer, that hard sun can toughen the pods and make them a little chewy. Still good to eat, just not so tender. So in that fierce sun, sow your beans, but give them a bit of shade cloth over the top. A light cloth stretched on some hoops to break the worst of the sun off the young plants. And if you are not sure whether you need it, put it on anyway. You lose nothing. And remember that cloth. It comes back at the very end, and it is the whole game. The second thing, and you will be sorry if you skip it, is potatoes. A potato put in the ground this month gives you a fall crop that will feed you right through the winter. There is not a better storage crop in all the garden. You grow them till the frost cuts the tops down, then you dig them and cure them and lay them by, and they will keep in a cool, dark cellar for months. My fall potatoes last me clear into the spring. Now here is that number I promised you. You reckon your potato timing off your own first frost. The date the killing cold usually comes to your ground. That one date decides everything. If your first frost comes early, the tail end of September or the 1st of October, then get your seed potatoes in the ground in early July. That gives them a couple weeks to break the surface, and 2 good months to grow before the cold. But if your frost holds off till late October or November, the way it does in my part of the country, then wait and plant in the back half of July. A potato does not care for heat. Plant it into the worst of August and the plant just sulks. So I set my seed potatoes on a shelf first, in indirect light, and let them sit a week or two till the eyes wake up and put out good, short, stout sprouts. Then I plant them at the end of the month and they come up in the cooler weather and grow unhappy. And do not fret over a light frost. It only kills the tops. The potatoes themselves are safe down in the dark ground. If you need seed, you have 3 plain ways to get it. 1. Buy proper seed potatoes grown for planting. 2. Buy organic potatoes from the store because those are not sprayed with the chemical that stops sprouting, so you can green them up and set them out. And 3. Go look in the back of your own pantry, because near everyone has a forgotten potato back there already gone to sprouting, and that one you can plant directly. The only one you cannot use is an ordinary store potato that has not sprouted, because most of those are treated to keep them from it, and one of those may just sit and rot before it ever comes up. So there is no excuse. Everyone can find a potato to put in the ground. The third thing to plant in July is basil. If you planted basil back in the spring, it is very likely starting to bolt on you about now, which is to say it is trying to flower and go to seed. And once it does that, the leaves turn bitter and the plant is near done. So July is just the right time to start a second wave. And if you never got around to basil at all, start your first wave right now, and you will still get a fine crop before the fall. Basil is one of the easiest things you can grow, and it gives you your choice of how to start it. Sow it straight in the ground, or start it in a tray and move it out, whichever suits you. I start mine in trays because we get hard, driving rains here that will wash a fine little basil seed right out of the ground. But if your rains are gentler, sow it straight out and save yourself the trouble. Here is the old rule, and it is a good one. Always keep 2 crops of basil going, an older and a younger. The heat of July starts beating up the spring basil, and it is wise to have fresh young plants coming on behind that are more willing to hold off on bolting. Keep the 2 going, and you never go without. And while you are at it, walk down the row and look for any older plants sending up flower heads, and pinch those heads off back to the next set of leaves. The leaves below take over, and cutting off the flowering stretches the life of the plant a good while longer. The fourth thing, and folks are always surprised by this one, is romaine lettuce. Most people think of lettuce as a cold weather crop, and they are half right. But the truth is your romaine does not want a frost on it. A hard freeze will damage the heads. What it wants is to come to size in the cool of the fall, when the days have gone mild and the nights have gone cool, but the real cold has not yet come. And to make that happen, you have to start it now, while it is still warm, so it is ready to finish in that sweet, cool stretch of autumn. You manage it by starting your seeds inside, where it is not so brutally hot, and setting the young plants out once the weather begins to turn. And you reckon it again off your own first frost. If your frost comes at the end of September, start your romaine seeds inside in early July and set them in the garden about the middle of August. But if your frost holds off till late October, like mine, wait and start toward the end of July, and set the plants out in early to middle September, once the worst heat has broken. And I will tell you plainly, a fall romaine is a better thing than a spring one. The spring lettuce comes to size just as the weather is warming, and warm weather makes lettuce bitter and loose. But the fall romaine matures as the nights are turning cool, and that gives you a sweeter, crisper, more tender head every time. If you have never grown your lettuce on into the fall, do it this year. The fifth and last thing to plant in July is another wave of cucumbers and zucchini. Now these belong to the same family, and they share the same nature. They come up fast, they grow fast, they fruit fast, and then they die fast. If you try to nurse one of these plants along all summer long, you will only be disappointed because they are not made to last. A cucumber vine or a zucchini plant has maybe 2 or 3 months in it, and then, beaten down by the heat and the bugs, it gives out, no matter how well you tend it. So the answer is not to fight that. The answer is to work with it, the way the old market growers did. It is called succession planting. You put in a fresh crop every 4 to 6 weeks, right through the season, so that you always have young plants coming into their prime just as the older ones are quitting. I had cucumbers a few weeks back that were the picture of health, pumping out fruit like they would never stop. And now, 3 or 4 weeks later, they are mostly spent and pulled. That is just the way of them. But because I have a fresh tray of young plants ready to go, I will never be without. As the old vines reach their end, the new ones are climbing and about to fruit, and the harvest never breaks. So put your new cucumbers and zucchini in now, and plan to put more in again in a month, and again after that. Set them where a spent crop has come out, a bed where the early potatoes were dug, or where a tired tomato has finished. Just do not plant the very same family right back on the same spot, which spreads disease. Now let me say a plain word about the whole of this, because it is the real lesson underneath all 5 of these crops. You are not a slave to the weather. That is what I want you to carry away from this. Too many folks look at a hard summer or an early winter and just throw up their hands and let the season beat them. But a gardener has tools, simple ones, that let him bend the season to his will. When it is too hot, a length of shade cloth over some hoops cools things down enough to start your crops early. When the cold comes on, a length of garden fabric thrown over the beds keeps the frost off and lets you grow weeks, even months, later than you thought you could. Shade cloth buys you the early end. Fabric buys you the late end. Put the two together, and you have added a great long stretch to your growing year on both ends, with nothing more than some cloth and a few hoops, and the knowing of when to use them. And I will tell you who profits from you not knowing this, though it is no great villain, so do not expect one. There is simply no money in a man planting a second garden from seed he saved and covering it with a scrap of old cloth. Nobody gets rich off you eating out of your own yard clear into December. The whole trade is built to sell you your vegetables in the store, in the dead of winter, trucked in from far off. And there is no salesman anywhere with a reason to teach you to grow your own instead. It is not that anyone is hiding it. It is only that no one profits by teaching it, and so it quietly slips away, one generation forgetting a little more than the last. No scheme. The money just runs the other way, so there are your 5. Sow your string beans, for they are tough and easy, and the bugs leave them be. Get your fall potatoes in, early or late by your own frost, for a storage crop to carry you through the winter. Start a second wave of basil so you never run short. Start your romaine now to finish sweet in the cool of the fall. And keep putting in cucumbers and zucchini every few weeks so the harvest never quits. Do that in the heat of July while the lazy gardens are giving up, and you will be eating from your ground long after they have gone to weeds. Tell me down in the comments what county you garden in, and when your first frost usually comes, because that is the number that decides all your timing, and it helps your neighbors here to see how it varies from one place to the next. And tell me what you are planting this month for the fall. I'm always glad to learn what does well in another man's ground. Next time out here, I want to show you how to build a proper compost pile the old way, layer upon layer through the season, so that by the time you are planting again, you have your own black, crumbly gold to feed all these crops with and never have to buy a bag of anything. But for now, remember this. The garden does not end in July. It only turns. Plant now in the worst of the heat, and you will eat in the best of the fall. The people who built this country with their hands knew that, and we are only just starting to remember.